Hello and welcome to episode number 32 of In Pursuit of Clarity, which I've simply titled The Virus. I don't normally like to speak on time-sensitive issues and current news stories, but considering the unprecedented and international dominance of this happening, I figured it deserves a cast devoted to the topic. With regard to my own internal dialogue, I'd held off on any strong opinions for quite a while, even though I'd had some early assumptions. But I think enough data is in now to come to some conclusions. Firstly, the models and forecasts of the 1 to 2 million dead weren't just off the mark, but wildly off the mark. We're currently at about 1/50th of this number, and it looks like the pace of deaths has likely peaked as we speak. Even with some creative math and counting not just those that died of COVID-19, but also those that died with COVID-19, it seems we're likely to see somewhere between 60 and 100,000 deaths overall in the United States, ballpark. New York just recently decided to include in the virus death toll those they simply suspect might have had the virus. And interestingly, the number of deaths we normally see from pneumonia this time of year has plummeted, indicating many of these, too, are being labeled as COVID deaths. Many of the large makeshift hospitals seem almost empty, and some are shutting down, others are scaling back massively. Large numbers of ventilators are still in storage, and it looks as if we overshot this mark by quite a distance too. I've heard from many doctors and nurses that their hospitals seem eerily quiet, far from the frenetic overload the media all but promised. Though interestingly, I am seeing quite a few dance videos posted by medical staff. Personally speaking, my only remaining concern is the longer-term effects on the immune system and lungs specifically, and whether reinfection is a possibility. Otherwise, this phenomenon seems to have been massively overhyped. Anyone who's followed me for any length of time knows that I'm not the biggest fan of materialistic consumerism as the beating heart of a nation or culture. So I'm certainly not motivated by a desire to pad the stock market or boost our GDP. But hearing men like Fauci and Gates and others claim we may never shake hands again, or that lockdown may continue for a year or two, is disconcerting and deeply annoying. And observing the reaction of the media and the blue checkmark crowd and their NPC legion of followers has been equally disconcerting and annoying. Further proof that a consensus of, quote, experts might cause much of this nation to believe virtually anything at any time. Even more disturbing, as always seems to happen in major moments like this, we've witnessed some of the most aggressive and invasive government overreach in history, and almost overnight. And not just government in this case, but big tech as well, in an almost supranational way. When such things happen, they set precedent for the future. So when we see people being arrested for attending a church service in their cars, or jogging on the beach alone, or sitting outside their homes, we should resist the urge to think these are one-time happenings we'll never have to endure again. Regardless of the exceptional circumstances at the outset, when civil liberties and personal freedoms are violated for any reason, it becomes far easier for it to happen again in the future. The behavior becomes normalized. The Patriot Act, sold to us as a temporary measure after 9/11, remained in effect into this year. Nearly all bad things tend to happen incrementally. A few predictions for the coming months. I think Trump and the Republicans at large will start advocating more aggressively for a return to normalcy, and the media and big tech and academia will be pushing even harder for not merely a lockdown, but likely a mandatory vaccine, and some stamp of approval, which they'll no doubt seek to control, indicating whether or not a person has dutifully received this mystery injection, and is thus cleared to rejoin society. I think we'll also hear them pushing new technology that I hope you'll all pay very close attention to and consider the implications of. They claim its goal is to track the spread of the virus, and several apps have already been created and ideas implemented on this front. This explanation is dubious, to say the least. A very small percentage of the population has been tested thus far, many using old testing methods that aren't very accurate, and even with perfect accuracy, A test today doesn't mean that one doesn't contract the virus tomorrow and carry it without significant symptoms. Moreover, recent data seems to suggest that vastly larger numbers than initial reports claimed have already been infected. So, needless to say, the logic and reasoning behind this technology doesn't make a great deal of sense. At least, not the stated reasoning. Consider just how much information might be gleaned via the real-time tracking of every individual, using their smartphones carried with them 24/7. Not only would this be priceless to corporations and governments, but consider how the data might be used by rogue organizations that tend to target specific races or religions, like the SPLC or ADL. What this technology would accomplish is every intelligence agency's dream come true, essentially mapping connections between every individual or group, allowing for analysis of one's friends, family, social circles. There's no doubt this is already done to some extent and on some smaller scale, but this would essentially catapult this total intrusion into the mainstream, and there's simply no chance of this data remaining under lock and key, even if they claim as much, and they always do at the outset. And even on the off chance that they didn't freely share this information with government and law enforcement, and other supposedly relevant interested parties, corporations and NGOs routinely hire hackers at arm's length and covertly to steal such information. Because such heists are impossible to trace, and because there's no undoing the theft. What this means in the age of technology is that if the data is gathered by anyone, anywhere, at any time, and for any reason, you can rest assured it'll soon be in the hands of every powerful or influential group that seeks it. In effect, every individual is then gathering and submitting their information automatically, in real time, on an ongoing basis. Every individual is assisting in creating a profile of themselves, to then be delivered into the hands of a collection of some of the worst people and organizations in the world. If you're friends with a person who is briefly friends with an individual accused of some illegal act, it'd suddenly be fairly easy to draw a provable and quantifiable connection between yourself and the accused, or to insinuate that you're both in the same network. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. I could speak for hours on the value of this type of information and the multitude of ways it might be used. We often think of these things as relatively minor, as if the privacy intrusions are wholly driven by a few greedy corporations who simply want to increase their profit margins. But the for-profit uses completely pale in comparison to the management and manipulation of the social organism and the related types of activity engaged in by governments and intelligence agencies. And on that note, the other major topic we're forced to confront is the issue of vaccines, their history, and the men and organizations behind their rollout. I can't elaborate much right this moment in this short podcast for a number of reasons, other than to say it is a worthwhile subject to look into. As per usual, things are rarely what they appear to be. In a recent White House press briefing on the virus, Tony Fauci attempted to counter-signal the recent evidence that the virus has now been officially connected to the secretive virology lab in Wuhan, the same lab with strong connections to the dual citizen and head of Harvard's chemical biology department, Charles Lieber, which I find interesting. And this brings up a final point I'd like to voice, a trend we're seeing today, and one totally unique and unprecedented in the scope of human history, as it depends on technology and efficient controls over the information flow of large populations, is this extreme of herd mentality with regard to how so many process major events like this. I just watched a particularly offensive propaganda piece by the Twitter account called Now This, which cherry-picked with practically scientific precision a collection of sights and sounds that might present Tony Fauci, this close friend of Hillary Clinton, George Soros, and Bill Gates, in the most positive light imaginable. And it's just one of the countless similar productions online. Nothing is new here. Our media is owned and operated by foreign powers and foreign interests. But what is new is that this masterfully constructed process of indoctrination has reached some critical mass, in which those still consuming it, wide-eyed and uncritical, are now often so far gone as to be essentially unreachable with reason. Hydroxychloroquine is a fantastic example here. Nearly all initial studies showed it was a drug with immense life-saving potential, and certainly no riskier than any of the vanity drugs advertised in commercials to viewers of CNN on a daily basis. Yet a social media army was mobilized to obliterate any positive information and speak in grave tones about how this new cure might just kill us all. Expert consensus is the new yardstick by which this group accepts or rejects anything as factual or truthful. A perfectly logical framework in a healthy and well-functioning society, in which those in prominent positions are largely uncorruptible individuals laboring selflessly for the public good. But of course, the situation we find ourselves in is practically the polar opposite of this. And this means that expert consensus is often the last thing we should be unthinkingly trusting as gospel. And a final note. As I speak, crowds are converging on capitals across the United States to take a stand against the absurd lockdown measures imposed. I've noticed that individuals like Richard Spencer never miss an opportunity to join the blue checkmark crowd in deriding and mocking these people in a pseudo-elitist fashion that no doubt strokes their ego. I've had to fight petty tendencies like this myself in the past, and I'm glad I did. I may not have a great deal in common with many of them on a personal level, but so many of these are the salt-of-the-earth types that work so hard, ask for so little, and are demonized in the most unjust ways around the clock, by the very worst sorts of people. This strange new attempt to conflate preserving our most fundamental rights with the doctrine of libertarianism is a ridiculous argument. Libertarianism is something of a suicidal dead end, all things considered. But the standing against the creation of a techno-globalist superstate, crafted exclusively by those who most hate us, is always a positive thing, and all of those who take this stand should be applauded. I support these individuals completely, and I appreciate their efforts. Watching passively as our most fundamental rights are stripped away, allowing the power dynamic to irrevocably shift, and simply hoping for the best, is not a viable path forward. Controlled opposition narratives are the polar opposite of viable paths forward. And if too many are drawn in by these siren songs, we'll have a far more difficult road ahead of us. And no matter what, we're in for some bumpy times. Far more than the virus, the lockdown and its ramifications and ripple effects will change everything. A delicate house of cards can only handle minor hiccups here and there. This is something much more intense, and there will be cascading domino effects everywhere, many of which we don't yet fully grasp. The price of a world that's neglected the cultivation of robustness and foresight. At this stage, we really do need to be ready for anything. So that's it for now. Apologies for the wait. Much of my attention has been on some very important upcoming videos as of late. But I do hope to get back to more podcasts in the future. I hope you're all well, and thank you for listening.
This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my